Realme GT8 Pro or the OnePlus 15. Which one of these two phones is the better buy in this season of expensive flagships and broken hearts? Well, I'm here to clear that confusion in a detailed comparison that we're going to be doing between these two phones. So watch this video till the end. I'm sure that you will find your answer. Alright, if you're watching me for the first time, I'm Ashar. This is Trakin Tech English, your destination for detailed, incisive gadget reviews. Now, both the phones have the same formula for 2025 flagship phone, candy bar designs with flat brushed aluminum sides and flat displays as well. Now, there is a fundamental difference in the way they approach the camera module. Now, I'll talk about Realme in a bit, but with OnePlus what you get is a squarish camera module. And it's very similar to what we saw with the OnePlus 13s. Now, this black variant of the phone and the violet variant of the phone come with a glass back, whereas the Sandstorm variant actually has fiberglass, which is the same fiberglass used in the back of this white variant of the GT8 Pro. Now, there are other two colors of the GT8 Pro which come with a vegan leather back. So you do not get a glass back variant of GT8 Pro. This could be because Realme has a larger periscope camera inside and therefore they wanted to keep the weight in check. Because even with the fiberglass, when you compare these two, the fiberglass variant of the GT8 Pro is actually heavier than the glass variant of the OnePlus 15. Now, talking about that camera module on the GT8 Pro, you see this looks very unique, right? That's because you have interchangeable camera modules on the GT8 Pro, which is a nice gimmicky touch. It's fun, but it's gimmicky. But it's nice, but it's fun. It's gimmicky. I don't know. You tell me. Fun or gimmicky in the comments. Now, in terms of protection, you get IP68 and 69 rating on both the phones, but you also get IP69K rating on the OnePlus, which actually makes it the best IP rating on a flagship phone this year, if I'm not wrong. And you also do get Corning Gorilla Glass Victus 2 protection on the front and Gorilla Glass 7i protection on the rear. Now, with Realme, we don't really know if there's Corning Gorilla Glass 7i or 3 or 5 because Realme does not mention that. It just says Corning Gorilla Glass. Now, ports and buttons are largely similar on both, but with OnePlus, you do get the extra plus key. You also get a USB Type-C Gen 3.2 port at the bottom, which is USB 2.0 on Realme. Now, that definitely gives OnePlus an advantage. So overall, if you look at it in terms of in-hand feel, in terms of USB capabilities and functionalities in general, I think that OnePlus does have a slight edge when it comes to the design and usability of the design itself. Obviously, there's a lot still left to discuss. We have to talk about the battery, the camera, the performance, the software, all of that. But before I move on, if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead, give us your support by hitting that subscribe button and maybe even giving us a thumbs up. And that will help us reach 1 million soon, which is something that we really want to get to faster. Now it's time to talk about the displays on both these phones, and both are OLED panels, largely similar in size as well, but there are some key spec differences. So Realme offers a higher resolution, OnePlus offers a higher refresh rate. Realme is an LTPS panel, OnePlus is an LTPO panel, which means that Realme can only refresh between 30, 60, 90, 120. OnePlus can refresh anywhere between 1 to 120 Hz. Realme can hit 2000 nits in high brightness mode, whereas OnePlus hits 1800 nits. And Realme can hit 7000 nits at 1% APL when you're watching HDR content, whereas OnePlus hits 3600 nits at 20% APL. Now these are the spec differences, but here's what we noticed in our testing, which is more important. So outdoors, Realme gets brighter than OnePlus. In fact, if you push the brightness slider to maximum, even then, Realme gets brighter than OnePlus. In HDR content, however, we couldn't really tell the difference between the two. Both are equally bright. By the way, both do also support Dolby Vision playback on Netflix, which is a good thing. Now, one thing I noticed is that Realme has a Pro Color mode, OnePlus doesn't have the Pro Color mode. And in general, Realme's color accuracy, especially when you're watching content, is better than OnePlus. Because there was a red skin problem that I had mentioned with OnePlus that doesn't exist on Realme. OnePlus's advantage is definitely the LTPO technology because it helps in better battery life, which I'll come to in a bit. So let me ask you this question. Would you rather compromise on the resolution for a higher refresh rate and LTPO technology, or would you rather have that higher resolution with a slightly brighter display but with no LTPO technology? Let me know the answer in the comments. I'd love to know your thoughts. Now, the rest of the aspects of the display include the ultrasonic in-display fingerprint scanner. Both the phones have it. They're very fast. In fact, both also have the same haptic motor, which means that the haptic feedback tuning is also largely similar. Both the phones also do support high-res codecs like LHDC and LDAC, which is great. But one area where I felt like OnePlus was better than Realme is definitely in the speaker performance. Loudness-wise, both are equally good, but OnePlus does sound richer because of the better bass response. Take a listen to it for yourself and let me know what you guys think in the comments. Alright, now talking about performance, it's the same setup that you have internally. Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5, LPDDR5X RAM type, it's with either 12GB or 16GB, and 256GB or 512GB of UFS 4.1 storage. Having the same hardware, does that equate to same performance? Not really. So in synthetic benchmarks like Antutu, CPU Throttle, and Geekbench, OnePlus 15 scores higher than Realme. But in GPU tests, it seems like Realme is doing slightly better, but it's like a marginal difference. It can be chalked to like, margin of error. Because we ran Solar Bay, we ran, Steel Nomad Lite, all of that is, largely similar on both. But the 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme stress test is something that showcases the difference between these two phones. Because in that test, you push the GPU and there OnePlus offers far better stability than Realme. Yes, Realme does offer 2 extra frames, but that doesn't really equate to much if it throttles so much. In fact, even the CPU throttle performance is better on the OnePlus 15 compared to the Realme GT8 Pro. Now in real world gaming, we played Genshin Impact targeting the 60 frames per second and Wuthering Waves as well. Both are neck to neck in terms of performance and heating as well. That's because we just play for 30 minutes. Now if you were to play for longer, maybe OnePlus would give better sustained performance compared to Realme. But more importantly, with OnePlus, you do have a lot of advantages. For example, Genshin Impact runs at native level 120 FPS because it uses the 3nm chipset for game frame interpolation, which means that there are far less, touch delay issues or stutters, all of those problems that are associated with the separate display chip that you have on the Realme GT8 Pro. Now with the GT8 Pro, you can achieve 144 FPS native on COD and BGMI, which is nice. But with OnePlus, you can actually achieve 165 FPS on COD, which again gives it an advantage. Overall, in terms of gaming performance, whenever we were playing with both these phones, I would generally tend to prefer OnePlus 15 over the Realme GT8 Pro. But it's not like the GT8 Pro is badly tuned or anything, it's just a different kind of tuning that Realme has gone with it. Now battery life again is better on the OnePlus 15. Firstly, you get a slightly larger 7300 mAh silicon nanostack battery, whereas on the Realme what you get is a 7000 mAh battery. Now the difference in the size itself is not that much, but more importantly, the LTPO technology is what gives OnePlus a little bit of a lead compared to Realme GT8 Pro. Now with OnePlus, you're consistently getting anywhere between 9.5 hours to 10 hours of screen on time, whereas with Realme, you can expect anywhere between 9 hours to 9 hours 15 minutes of screen on time. Now both the phones support 120 watt charging, take about 40 minutes for a full charge, and you also get support for 50 watt AirWalk wireless charging as well. No MagSafe support, you can get separate accessories to get magnetic attachments. Network performance wise, both are excellent, nothing really separating the two. We tried Airtel and Jio, both work absolutely fine. You also get support for Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 6 and NFC on both the phones. Now OnePlus has this special chip, G2 chip for Wi-Fi. Realme also has something similar called S1 chip for Wi-Fi. So yeah, basically you get better Wi-Fi performance on both. Now let's talk about the cameras. And here some interesting things are happening because OnePlus doesn't have the Hasselblad branding anymore and it has its own Detail Max engine for camera algorithm. While Realme this time around has actually partnered with the camera brand, and that is Ricoh, with a special Ricoh mode which I'll come to in a bit. Now the camera specs of both these phones are on your screen right now, so you can pause and take a look at it. You can tell for yourself that Realme definitely has an advantage when it comes to the hardware because of the larger periscope camera. But hardware is one aspect of the equation. How are the photos? Let's take a look at it. Now when you look at the primary camera shots, both the phones can actually shoot 26 megapixel high-res shots, but OnePlus doesn't over-sharpen as much as Realme does. In fact, when you take 26 megapixel HDR shots on both the phones, OnePlus does a better job because Realme tends to show some aberrations like blooming and chromatic aberration. Now even with the 2x shot, I preferred OnePlus here over Realme. However, at 3x, Realme's 200 megapixel periscope camera clearly outperforms the 50 megapixel sensor on OnePlus, which is to be expected because OnePlus doesn't have a dedicated 3x camera. But even at 3.5x, the 200 megapixel camera seems to be doing a better job on Realme compared to OnePlus. At longer zoom levels like 6x, 7x and 10x, Realme retains more details than OnePlus. And when you're looking at 20x and beyond, like for example 30x, 60x, there the AI crops in and both tend to do like this AI processing, which is slightly overdone and I'm not really a fan of it. But overall, if you look at zoom performance, Realme does have the edge over OnePlus. However, in color accuracy, OnePlus looks more natural while Realme boosts colors slightly. In the Uno box sample, the reds, the greens and the yellows are visibly boosted in Realme's sample. It also generally tends to have a contrast heavy look. Now in human subjects, I would say both are not very accurate in terms of skin tones, but between the two, I would say OnePlus is the lesser evil. In fact, OnePlus has the special master mode, which is one of my favorite modes now, and with that you can actually get better skin tones, but don't expect any HDR multi-stack happening there. Talking about which, the HDR performance is largely similar on both, with OnePlus being slightly better, because in this sample you will notice that OnePlus picks more details from the shadows compared to Realme, and that is just the way the look has been created for Realme, where it's a little contrast heavy. In the second image of Parikshit shot against the light, Realme's image looks a little over-processed compared to OnePlus's image, which looks a little more subtle. OnePlus seems to have improved the HDR pipeline for shooting people against a harsh backlit scenario, and it is definitely better looking than Realme. In portraits, both have a very similar edge detection, but OnePlus seems to have better skin tones here once again. However, Realme's 3x portrait shot has far more details, and you also get 6x portraits with Realme, which you cannot do with OnePlus, and therefore it does have more reach. And in general, I prefer the portraits from Realme purely because you get more details compared to OnePlus. Ultra-wide performance is largely similar on both in terms of detail and color science consistency, but Realme manages slightly better HDR on its ultra-wide lens, which OnePlus could not replicate. If you're shooting low-light shots with the ultra-wide angle camera, it's also largely similar. In low-light shots with the primary camera, we definitely preferred the OnePlus here over Realme, primarily because when you look at the 100% crop, you can see that the image is sharper. More importantly, there's less noise, and the processing seems better here. Now, selfies are better on the OnePlus 15 except for the skin tone, which Realme handles slightly better. But in low light, the selfies from OnePlus are definitely better, primarily because you get autofocus. So you get a tack sharp focus every single time you take a selfie. Alright, now let's talk about the Ricoh integration that you get with Realme. And I've spoken about it in my detailed review of the phone. If you haven't watched that yet, go check it out. But essentially what you get is a special Ricoh GR mode. In this mode, you get 5 filters that includes the standard negative film, positive film, black and white, and high black and white, which is basically a high contrast black and white option. And the kind of high contrast black and white shots that you can make using this Realme gives it a little bit of a character, which I kind of like. Alright, now let's talk about video recording, and here both the phones have upgraded quite a bit from the predecessor. So in videos, you get support for 4K 120fps log and Dolby Vision video recording quality. In fact, both the phones can also shoot 4K 60fps Dolby Vision videos using all the lenses. Now in 4K 60fps SDR videos from the primary camera, OnePlus definitely delivers better colors and stabilization. In fact, even with the ultra-wide angle camera, we prefer the 4K 60fps footage that we shot using OnePlus compared to Realme. Now because Realme has that larger 200 megapixel periscope camera, in zoom shots, the larger physical sensor comes in handy, and you do get better zoom videos on Realme. In fact, with Realme, you can actually go up to 30x, whereas on OnePlus, you can only go up to 18x. However, once again, selfie videos are better on OnePlus 15 compared to Realme. And most importantly, if you're shooting with the primary camera in low light, then OnePlus 15 does a better job than Realme. Now, Realme does have its fair share of advantages. One of the major advantages is the larger periscope camera, which is a huge advantage, right? Because you do get better zoom shots, and more importantly, you also get better portraits. And I do like that Ricoh GR mode as well. It's kind of unique. But in all of the other scenarios, I prefer the consistency that we got with OnePlus. Yes, they're not the best cameras out there, but between the two, I would tend to prefer the OnePlus over Realme purely because all the cameras seem to do a good job, not just the periscope. Alright, now finally to talk about the software experience. Again, it's largely similar on both except for a few differences because both are based on the ColorOS code base. What you get with OnePlus is OxygenOS 16 based on Android 16. With Realme, what you get is Realme UI 7 based on Android 16. Both the brands are promising 4 years of software updates, but with OnePlus, you're getting 6 years of security updates, which is 5 years on Realme. Not too much of a difference here. See, I've made an in-depth video of Realme UI 7. If you haven't watched that, definitely go check it out. We also have in-depth videos of OxygenOS 16, so go check that out as well. But in terms of similar features, you both get Mindspace, you get Gemini support, you get Circle to Search, AI Writer, AI Eraser, AI Reflection Eraser, all of that are there. Now with Realme, you get an additional AI Notify brief for notification summaries, which is very similar to what iOS does. There's AI Framing Master, which is similar to Camera Coach on Pixel phones. Then there's AI Smart Loop and AI Gaming Coach. You also do get parallel animations on OnePlus, which is seamless animations on Realme. So animations wise, both are pretty fast. You get scalable icons, scalable folders, all of that are there. But Realme does have a few visual differences, key visual differences in the form of the transparent dock and the glass-like effect in the notification shade that you get. It's a little too much of an iOS inspiration if you ask me. So overall, when it comes to the software experience, I think both are really good. OxygenOS has a little bit of an advantage over Realme UI just because it feels a little more cohesive. So finally, after having used both these phones, the Realme GT8 Pro is probably the first GT phone that I feel has come very close to OnePlus in terms of performance and finesse and flagship experience. Both are strong picks, but between the two, I would probably still pick OnePlus. Firstly, because price tag is largely similar on both, and OnePlus tends to keep the price and it doesn't drop price, it's got better resale value. All of that, yes, agreed. That is better on OnePlus. But more importantly, OnePlus 15 offers better performance, better battery life, and a more consistent camera experience. Now, do you agree with that assessment or not? Let me know in the comments, and you can have a different take because all opinions are respected here. I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, keep tracking and stay safe.